Today's programme seems particularly relevant as we struggle to survive and understand the pandemic of coronavirus. What has become apparent is that in moments of tragedy, there is always humanity. As we now know, coronavirus is particularly affecting minority communities, including Native Americans. Not for any particular reason, except for centuries, decades, years, they have been disadvantaged economically, socially, and even politically. And for Irish people, we are particularly struck by the large giving from Irish people to Native Americans, who are suffering particularly during this terrible epidemic. Many of them attached to their donations a message saying they are doing it in memory of a gift that the Choctaws and Cherokees gave to Ireland in 1847. Just as Native Americans came to the help of the starving Irish in 1847, today Irish people are coming to the help of Native Americans. This shows the spirit of two people who have been impoverished, marginalised, and beaten down on so many occasions. Yet their spirit of humanity has never been defeated. The circle of giving continues, and it continues to inspire us today.
My name's Leanne Howe. I'm here at the Strokestown Park, the library of the house. I'm here to talk a little bit about the Choctaw Nation gift to the Irish in 1847.
I'm an enrolled citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and I was born and raised there. I first heard about the Choctaws giving money to the Irish for famine relief from my mother, Christine Billy Pointer. She said that the Choctaws wept when they heard about the terrible famine in Ireland, So they took up a collection in 1847 at Scullyville, a gathering place in Indian Territory. They collected as much money as they could and sent it. People ask me today, why did the Choctaws help the people of Ireland, a people they'd never even met? One reason, I think, is that starving is still an anathema to Choctaws, and for good reasons. In 1831, Choctaws nearly starved to death on the Trail of Tears thanks to the Andrew Jackson government and his appetite for native lands. President Andrew Jackson, the son of Irish immigrants then, would ensure that whites would indeed have more land and potentially better lives by vanquishing American Indians and, of course, Choctaw people from their eastern homelands. It wouldn't be so bad, but Andrew Jackson called on southeastern Indians and Choctaws to give food and aid to fight the War of 1812 between Great Britain and the United States. Choctaws had responded with food and warriors, and as a reward for our help, Jackson forced all Choctaw people to walk west, giving up their cornfields, potato patches, beans, and tomato gardens, and even our sacred Naniwaya, our mother mound. Ema.
Irene, go.
The Choctaws have a concept, the word ikikoa, and it means a sharing. It means working to help support other people together. Ema, Choctaws must give and give and give, and Americans took and took and took. Consider the terms of the Dancing Rabbit Creek Treaty, which called for Choctaws to cede 11 million acres to the foreign government of America in exchange for 15 million acres in Indian Territory. Sounds like a fair exchange, except there was one problem. There's no water in the new Indian Territory. Later in the same decade, all other southeastern tribes would follow the Choctaws on their own Trail of Tears. My ancestors were a part of that removal from Mississippi. When they arrived in Indian Territory, they settled on land around Taney Hill, just outside of McAllister, now in Oklahoma. Today, I'm one of 223,000 plus enrolled members of the Choctaw Nation. We survived, and in some ways I can say we're even thriving.
So only about 16, 17 years after our own removal did the Choctaw people take up a collection to send to the Irish for famine relief. That story resonates still with the Choctaw people in Oklahoma. We still understand what that was like.
Listen, can you hear it? From the land of it becomes a chorus.
This is a bit from Singing Still. I'm going to read from a couple of poems. This is called Intek, Sister, as she helps brother pack. This is about the family that's being removed and has to leave our homelands. This happened from 1830 to really 1832. The last removal was 1904, so that gives you some context for how long it took to get the Choctaws out of our homelands in Mississippi. So this poem is called Intek, Sister, as she helps brother pack. Our leaving will be sung by every president, every Supreme Court justice, ever hang around the fort lawyer, every cavalry officer, every merchant, every Wall Street nymph, every thief among thieves, every hazardous waste CEO, every medical waste CEO, every stockholder of the wasted new lands, every rat that shimmied off the ships from Spain, Italy, France, Alsace, German, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, every pox that crawled off English blankets and onto our hands. Our homelands sing a heart song of sorrow. And sing and sing and sing. She is singing still. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read from the last poem that I'm going to read today from Singing Still. This is Ishki, Mother Looks Homeward. They moved into our log cabin yesterday. Yelping like young puppies at play, they tore down the center pole of our chief's dance ground, the one with the gar carved atop. Burned it for firewood, joyous barking. But we could hear the gar rolling in the flames close to the surface, as if he were still in a chafalaya. Gar, he moves slowly except when striking at prey. Now he soars high on a draft of air, carried on wings of ash, heading west. Isa halali hatoko, iksa ilya ishashki. Isa halali hatoko, iksa ilya ishashki. Because you are holding on to me, I am not dead yet. I am not dead yet.
Because you to me, I am not I am not dead.
One of the most remarkable features of the Great Hunger, and one of the most inspiring ones, is the fact that so many people from across the world, many of whom had no association with Ireland, sent food, clothing, money or seeds to help feed the starving Irish. By the end of 1846, by the beginning of 1847, a massive fundraising activity was starting to take place, and it spread from Dublin and from England to all parts of Ireland and very quickly to all parts of the world. But even more remarkably, people gave who themselves were poor, impoverished, dispossessed and marginalised. One of the most remarkable stories is that of Native Americans or First Nations throughout North America. Many of their stories have been lost to history, but we know through some of the accounts of fundraising activities that a number of Native American groups gave, and gave very generously, given their own impoverished standards of life. The formation of the Quaker committees in Dublin and London inspired people in New York to form their own committee. So in February 1847, the General Relief Committee of New York was formed, and its mission was to support the work of the Quakers. But what's really interesting about the New York Committee was that its chairman and the instigator was a man who had no connection with Ireland, Mindent van Schaik. He was a man of Dutch origin. He was a philanthropist, known at the time for bringing clean water to New York. And he asked the Dublin Committee, "What can I do to help?" And they said, "We need food, we need clothing, we need seed." So Van Schaik used his business acumen to actually help send food to Ireland. And what's interesting, this man who had no Irish connections very quickly saw what was the problem in Ireland. He saw the unfair land system, especially the perennial problem of absentee landlords who did nothing to help their tenants. And he also believed that Ireland was misgoverned. So within weeks, donations had come to the New York Committee from all over North America. And some of the most truly remarkable donations that were received were from the First Nations people, Native Americans. We know of the Choctaw donation. In fact, it seems they gave twice, at least. They gave in April, they sent money to the New York Committee, maybe $10, and then within a few short weeks, they sent $174. And what makes their donation remarkable, not just in the amount of their generosity, but in the fact that these people, not so long before, had been systematically removed from their own homelands during the infamous Trail of Tears. And as a result of that, they had lost much and suffered in the process. And yet they recognised the suffering of other people and came to the assistance of the poor Irish. The logistics of getting this to Ireland are interesting. They sent almost $200 to the committee in New York. The committee in New York mostly used this money to purchase food, and then the committee obtained the use of shipping. And by May 1847, 4 ships bearing food were sent to Ireland. By the end of the year, 63 ships had been sent by the New York Committee to Ireland. And the Choctaw donation was a very important part of this life-saving mission. The Choctaws were not the only Native Americans to give. We know the Cherokees also gave, again in May 1847. And the Cherokees had a slightly different history from the Choctaws. At the time of the famine, the chief of the Cherokees was a man called Chief John Ross. And as his name might suggest, he was actually of Scottish origin. And the Cherokees sent 2 separate donations. One was to Ireland, again through the New York Committee, but another one they wanted to send to Scotland, because they heard that the potato had failed in the Highlands of Scotland. And because of their special relationship with Scotland, they asked that their second donation be sent to the poor, starving people of Scotland. The Choctaw donation has been commemorated in a number of artistic ways. So in 2005, a Galway-based sculptor, Kieran Tuohy, created a beautiful piece of sculpting that is actually in bog oak, wood that is over 3,000 years old, so it brings with it its own spirituality. And he called it Thank You to the Choctaw People. And it's based on the notion, the circle of giving, that if you give, other people in the future will give to you, which is exactly what happened in 1847. And I would urge you to come to Quinnipiac and try and see this exquisite piece of art. More recently, in 2017, people in the small town of Middleton in Cork created their own sculpture based on 6-metre-high feathers, and it's called Kindred Spirits. And again, that recognition of Native Americans and Native Irish being the victims of other people's heartless policies. Yet they found their own humanity to come together in other people's time of need. And in 2017 also, Antisha Kleovaradka visited the Choctaw Nation in Oklahoma. And there he delivered a personal message of thanks, and he also announced a scholarship that would be open to young people of the Choctaw Nation, so that they could come and study in Ireland and learn something about our culture, and for that cultural and mutual enrichment to continue into the future.
Famine Pots is due out in September 2020, and it is a collaboration of writers from both communities. We have 4 Choctaw contributors, 4 Irish contributors, and together we were interested in not only honouring and celebrating the story of the gift from the Choctaw to the Irish, but also thinking about the historical, social and cultural context in which the gift took place. So Leanne and I were very interested in the extent to which Choctaw and Irish storytelling traditions have responded to this fantastic story. Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland, once said that the stories of the gift are very much a part of our cultural memory in Ireland. And I think Leanne and I felt that that is both true not only for the Irish community but also for the Choctaw community as well. So one thing that we were very keen to do was to bring together historians, academics and creative writers, poets and fictionists, and to ruminate on the ways in which this story has been told and what that might mean for us and how it continues to be relevant today.
Shazam!